In April 1815, people heard what they thought was cannon fire echoing across the Indonesian islands. Ships changed course. Soldiers were mobilized, but there were no cannons, there was no battle. What they were hearing was a mountain in Indonesia tearing itself apart. It didn't just erupt. It tore a column of fire 40 kilometers into the sky, swallowed its own summit, and set off a chain of events that killed more than 100,000 people across the globe. And Tambora wasn't even the worst one. Supervolcanoes are one of the most extreme forces in nature and one of the least understood. They don't look like volcanoes. There's no towering cone, no obvious warning. They hide beneath lakes, beneath national parks, beneath entire regions of the Earth. And when they go, they don't just erupt, they collapse. They rewrite the atmosphere. They've ended summers, triggered famines, and may have come within a breath of ending our species entirely. This is the science and history of supervolcanoes, and what they tell us about the fragility of everything we take for granted. On April 10, 1815, Mount Tambora in Indonesia reached its violent climax. The eruption column punched over 40 kilometers, 25 miles into the atmosphere. Entire villages on Sumbawa were erased by pyroclastic flows before anyone could run. The mountain lost a third of its own height in a single night. The explosion ejected enough material to bury a city the size of London under hundreds of meters of ash. It was the largest volcanic eruption in recorded human history, and most of the world had no idea it had happened. The ash cloud from Tambora didn't stay over Indonesia. It spread. Within months, a veil of volcanic particles circled the globe, dimming the sun across the northern hemisphere. The following year, 1816, became known as the year without a summer. Snow fell in New England in June. Crops failed across Europe, China, and North America. Famine and cholera swept from the Ganges River all the way to Moscow. More than 100,000 people died, most of them nowhere near the eruption. The most dangerous volcanoes on Earth don't look like volcanoes. Most volcanoes build upward. Supervolcanoes do the opposite. Magma accumulates in a vast underground chamber, building pressure for thousands, sometimes millions of years. When the crust finally gives way, the ground doesn't blow outward. It collapses inward, forming a massive depression called a caldera. The geology is almost the reverse of what you'd expect. The bigger the eruption, the less it looks like one. Some of the most dangerous supervolcanoes on Earth are almost invisible from the surface. To understand what separates a supervolcano from a regular eruption, consider this. Mount Pinatubo in the Philippines erupted in 1991, one of the largest eruptions of the 20th century. It cooled global temperatures for 2 years and killed around 800 people. Tambora was roughly 10 times more powerful than Pinatubo, and Tambora wasn't even a supervolcano by scientific definition. The eruptions that qualify as true super-eruptions make Tambora look like a warning shot. Around 1600 BC, a supervolcanic eruption on the Greek island of Santorini didn't just destroy the island, it may have ended a civilization. The Minoan culture, one of the most advanced in the ancient world, vanished from history shortly after. The explosion sent a tsunami taller than a 6-story building crashing into coastlines across the eastern Mediterranean. The eruption was so total, so complete, that some historians believe it inspired the legend of Atlantis, an advanced civilization swallowed by the sea in a single catastrophic day. Beneath Yellowstone National Park in the United States sits one of the most studied supervolcanoes on Earth. The caldera is so vast it took scientists decades to recognize it from the ground. You can only see its true scale from space. It stretches roughly 55 by 72 kilometers, or 34 by 45 miles. Large enough to contain an entire city. It has erupted 3 times in the last 2 million years, each time burying much of North America under ash. The most recent major eruption, around 640,000 years ago, was 1,000 times more powerful than Mount Pinatubo. Yellowstone is not dormant. It is simply between eruptions. One of the strangest facts about Yellowstone is that the ground itself moves. The land above the magma chamber rises and falls, pushed up and pulled down by the heat below. In some years it lifts, in others it sinks. Scientists monitor it constantly. The geysers, the hot springs, the boiling mud pools, they're not tourist attractions. They're symptoms, evidence that something enormous is still very much alive beneath the surface of the Earth. Around 74,000 years ago, a supervolcano in Sumatra, Indonesia called Toba erupted with a force that dwarfs anything in recorded history. It ejected enough material to bury a continent. The ash cloud blanketed the Indian subcontinent in a layer thick enough to walk on. Volcanic winter followed, years of cold, darkness, and failed harvests across the globe. Some scientists believe the human population may have been reduced to just a few thousand survivors. Whether or not that's true, Toba remains the closest thing to a near-extinction event our species has ever faced. Evidence of ancient supervolcanic eruptions is preserved in ice cores drilled from Greenland and Antarctica. Each eruption leaves a chemical fingerprint, a spike of sulfuric acid locked in layers of ice that have been accumulating for hundreds of thousands of years. Scientists read these cores like a history book written in chemistry. What they've found is alarming. Major eruptions appear again and again throughout the record, each one coinciding with periods of rapid climate change, species loss, and in some cases, the collapse of entire human civilizations. Under the city of Naples, Italy, lies a supervolcanic system called the Campi Flegrei, the Burning Fields. Unlike Yellowstone, this one sits directly beneath a densely populated urban area. In recent decades, the ground around Naples has been rising. Streets have cracked, buildings have shifted. In 1984, the threat was serious enough that 40,000 people were evacuated. The system hasn't produced a major eruption in around 39,000 years. But the geology is restless, and scientists classify it as one of the highest-risk supervolcanic systems on Earth. If a supervolcano the scale of Yellowstone or Naples erupted today, the destruction would be staggering. Pyroclastic flows, walls of superheated gas and rock moving faster than a racing car, would obliterate everything within hundreds of kilometers. The ash cloud would ground every aircraft on Earth. Within days, ash would begin settling across entire continents, collapsing roofs, contaminating water supplies, and shutting down agriculture across the northern hemisphere. The volcanic winter that followed could last years. It wouldn't be an apocalypse in the cinematic sense. It would be slower, and in many ways, worse. The science of volcanic forcing is more alarming than most people realize. The 1991 eruption of Mount Pinatubo temporarily cooled global temperatures by around half a degree. Crops failed across Southeast Asia. Aircraft engines were destroyed mid-flight by invisible clouds of volcanic glass, and Pinatubo was a fraction of the scale of a true super-eruption. The atmosphere is far more vulnerable to volcanic disruption than the geography of any single eruption suggests. A supervolcano wouldn't just affect the region around it, it would affect everything. Here's what makes supervolcanoes genuinely unsettling from a scientific standpoint. We don't have a complete map of them. New calderas are still being identified. In 2018, geologists confirmed a previously unknown supervolcanic system beneath the Aleutian Islands in Alaska. Others likely exist beneath the ocean floor, hidden under kilometers of water. The world map of known supervolcanoes is almost certainly incomplete. And unlike earthquakes or hurricanes, supervolcanoes give very little warning before the final stages of an eruption. Most people, when they think of volcanoes, think of Pompeii. In 79 AD, Mount Vesuvius buried an entire Roman city under meters of ash and pumice, killing thousands in hours and freezing their final moments in stone. It is one of the most haunting disasters in human history. Vesuvius ejected roughly 3 cubic kilometers, 0.7 cubic miles of material. The Toba eruption ejected nearly 1,000 times that. Pompeii was a tragedy. A supervolcano is something our language doesn't really have a word for. Pompeii buried a city. Tambora erased a summer. Toba may have nearly killed our species. Santorini may have swallowed a civilization so completely, we turned it into myth. And right now, beneath Yellowstone, beneath Naples, beneath the ocean floor, the same process is still running. Magma accumulating, pressure building. The Earth doing what it has always done on a timescale that makes all of human history look like a single afternoon. We didn't discover supervolcanoes, we just started paying attention.